Welcome to Hungarian Insights, your go-to channel for exploring Hungary's rich history, vibrant culture, and language learning resources. Whether you're a student planning to study in Hungary, an expat eager to grasp the nation's heritage, an individual preparing for the Hungarian citizenship exam, or a bilingual student seeking to complement your studies, our podcasts serve as a captivating starting point, and our smart, modern learning tips and resources are tailored to make your journey enjoyable and effective.
All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Hungarian history.
Specifically, we're looking at the period after King Stephen I.
Yeah, the guy who brought Christianity to Hungary, set the stage, laid the foundation for what would become a pretty powerful kingdom.
Right, Stephen I, crowned in 1000 AD. That's a pretty big legacy to live up to.
Exactly. And today, we're going to see how his successors handled that challenge. What happened after he left the scene?
Well, it's fascinating, actually. You can almost see the echoes of Hungary's past, their history, in those early years after Stephen.
Echoes of the past. What do you mean?
Well, remember, before they settled down, before the kingdom, the Magyars, they were known for something else.
For?
Their raids across Europe. They were these incredible horsemen, warriors, always testing their strength, pushing the boundaries.
And they had this, restless energy, this warrior spirit.
Exactly. And I think even after they established a kingdom, some of that energy was still there. You see it in those early succession disputes.
Ah, yes, the succession disputes. It wouldn't be a good history story without a little royal drama, right?
Right. Stephen I dies, and suddenly there's no clear line of inheritance. Different factions are vying for power. It's a free-for-all.
I bet it got pretty messy.
Oh, it did. These weren't just family squabbles, These were full-blown power struggles. They really weakened the kingdom, made it vulnerable to outside threats.
So even as they were trying to establish this new kingdom, they were dealing with internal conflict and external threats. Not an easy start, huh?
Not at all. It really makes you wonder, if those successions had gone differently, would Hungary's history be completely different today?
It's like a butterfly effect, right? One small change could lead to a totally different outcome.
Exactly. But even with all that chaos, there were moments of stability. One figure who stands out is King Géza. He ruled in the late 11th century.
Géza. Okay, tell me about him.
Well, he managed to consolidate power, to bring things under control, laid the groundwork for a more unified kingdom.
So he was kind of like the bridge between Stephen I and, well, what came next?
And what came next was actually a pretty remarkable period. We're talking about the reign of King Béla III.
Béla III. Now, he's a name that deserves some attention, right?
Oh, absolutely. Under Béla in the late 12th century, Hungary experienced a golden age. We're talking peace, prosperity, cultural flourishing. He expanded the kingdom's borders, strengthened the economy.
So they went from these early struggles to, a medieval superpower.
It's a great analogy. For a while, they were really a force to be reckoned with in Europe.
But like all good things, I'm guessing it didn't last forever.
You're right about that. And the event that really changed everything was the Mongol invasion.
Oh boy, the Mongols. Everyone knows about the Mongols. Those guys weren't exactly known for their diplomacy.
1241. Batu Khan leads the Mongol armies into Hungary. And let me tell you, it was devastating.
I'm talking about sacked cities, right?
More than that. We're talking about half the population killed or enslaved. A complete and utter catastrophe.
It's hard to even imagine the scale of destruction. How did they even begin to recover from that?
Well, that's where Béla IV comes in.
Another Béla.
Yep, Béla IV. He's actually known as the second founder of the nation.
Wow, second founder. That's quite a title.
He had to rebuild Hungary from almost nothing. And to do that, he made a pretty significant change.
What did he do?
Stone castles. He started building stone castles all over the kingdom.
Stone castles. Interesting. Why the switch?
He realized that the old way of doing things, relying on earthworks and wooden fortifications, just wasn't going to cut it against a force like the Mongols.
Smart move. So these stone castles, they were more than just military structures, right?
Right. They were symbols. They represented defiance, a determination to survive, to rebuild.
So even in the face of this incredible tragedy, the Mongol invasion, they found a way to adapt, to innovate, to come back stronger. Pretty impressive stuff.
Absolutely. And that resilience, that spirit of innovation, that's something we're going to see again and again throughout Hungarian history. We were talking about those early kings and the power struggles.
Yeah, those succession disputes, they sound pretty intense.
They were, but that whole power struggle thing, it wasn't just a phase.
You mean it stuck around?
Oh, yeah. It became like a recurring theme in Hungarian history. This tension between the monarchy and the nobles, it pops up again and again over the centuries.
Like a tug of war.
Exactly. And a great example of this is King Andrew II.
Andrew II. Okay, so what's his story?
He ruled in the early 13th century. And he did something really interesting. He issued this document. It's called the Golden Bull.
The Golden Bull. Sounds important.
It was. Basically, it gave the nobles more power, more rights.
Wait, he gave them more power?
Yep. He kind of had to. After the Mongol invasion, the monarchy was weak.
So he needed the nobles on his side.
Exactly. It was a way to keep the peace, to prevent more unrest.
Smart move, but didn't you say this power struggle thing kept coming back?
It did. The Golden Bull, it created long-term challenges. It limited the king's authority, gave the nobles more leverage.
So even when he was trying to solve the problem, he might have actually made it worse in the long run.
In a way, yeah. It's like he planted a seed that would eventually grow into a bigger issue down the road.
Fascinating how these things play out over time. So who comes after Andrew? Does anyone manage to, really tame this power struggle?
Well, there's one king who stands out, Matthias Corvinus.
Matthias Corvinus. Okay, that's a name I've heard before.
He's considered one of Hungary's greatest kings, ruled from 1458 to 1490.
And what made him so great?
He was a true Renaissance man. Think military genius, patron of the arts, brilliant strategist, and all that.
Wow, that's quite the resume.
Under his rule, Hungary experienced a period of incredible growth and prosperity. He modernized the army. He was a big supporter of arts and culture.
So he's out there conquering new laws, but he also finds time to, commission some fancy artwork.
Pretty much. He even established this amazing library, the Bibliotheca Corviniana. It was one of the largest libraries in Europe at the time.
A king who loves books. I like this guy already.
But he wasn't all about peace and prosperity,
Oh, right. He was a military leader, too.
He fought wars against the Ottomans, against the Holy Roman Empire, even against his own rebellious nobles.
So basically, he kept busy.
Yeah, no kidding. But his reign was definitely a high point for Hungary.
But I have a feeling things are about to take a turn, aren't they? What happens after Matthias?
Well, Matthias dies in 1490, and that pretty much marks the beginning of a downward spiral.
Uh-oh. Here we go again.
Those old power struggles come back, the kingdom weakens, and then there's a new threat on the horizon.
Who are we talking about now?
The Ottoman Empire?
The Ottomans. Yikes. They were a pretty big deal back then, weren't they?
They were a major force, and they had their sights set on expanding their empire, and Hungary was right in their path.
Oh, that can't be good.
It wasn't. 1526, the Battle of Mohawks.
The Battle of Mohawks. This sounds like a big one.
It was a clash of titan, basically. The Ottomans, led by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, and the Hungarians, well, let's just say they were outmatched.
So what happened?
It was a disaster for the Hungarians. They suffered a crushing defeat. Their king, Louis II, was killed.
Wow, so after all those years of prosperity and growth, they get hit with this.
Yeah, and it gets worse. The Battle of Mohawks basically marks the beginning of Ottoman rule in Hungary.
So they lost their independence.
Not completely. The kingdom was divided. The Ottomans took control of the central and southern regions. The Habsburgs got the west, and Transylvania became sort of semi-independent.
So basically, Hungary got carved up.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark chapter in their history.
But even under Ottoman rule, I imagine they didn't just give up, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Hungarian culture and identity, it persisted. They found ways to adapt, to survive.
That resilience again.
Exactly. And actually, this whole period, this division, the foreign rule, it had an interesting effect.
What do you mean?
It strengthened their sense of national identity. It created this shared experience of hardship.
So they kind of bonded over their shared struggle.
In a way, yes. And that would fuel future movements for independence.
So even in the midst of this, national tragedy, the seeds of resistance are being sown.
Right, and that's something we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive. It's amazing to think about how those centuries after Tudívan I really shaped Hungary's identity.
Right. All those challenges, the power struggles, those invasions.
Yeah, it's like they were constantly being tested.
And yet, they always found a way to bounce back.
Exactly. That resilience is a big part of what makes Hungarian history so fascinating. And as we move into the 16th and 17th centuries, things get even more interesting.
Why is that?
Because now you have these new players on the scene, the Ottomans in the east, the Habsburgs in the west.
So Hungary's caught in the middle of this power struggle between empires.
Right, and it creates this whole new set of challenges for them. How do they maintain their own identity?
How do they preserve their culture?
Exactly, and you see different responses to this challenge. Some Hungarians, they resist the Ottomans outright.
Like armed resilience.
Yeah, there were a number of uprisings. Some were led by nobles who refused to submit to Ottoman rule.
I bet those were pretty intense.
Oh, they were. And sometimes they were actually successful.
Really? They managed to fight off the Ottomans?
Well, not always, but there were some notable victories, like the Siege of Eger in 1552.
The Siege of Eger. Tell me about that.
A small Hungarian force, they held off a massive Ottoman army.
Wow. against all odds.
It became a legendary story, a real symbol of Hungarian resistance.
Those kinds of stories can really inspire a nation, can't they? Keep that fighting spirit alive.
Hmm.
But what about the Habsburgs? What was their approach?
The Habsburgs, they were a different kind of challenge. They weren't interested in conquering Hungary outright.
So what did they want?
They wanted to integrate Hungary into their empire, to absorb it, so to speak.
But I imagine the Hungarians weren't too keen on just becoming another part of the Habsburg Empire.
You're right about that. They pushed back. They wanted to preserve their autonomy, their traditions.
So there was tension between them and the Habsburgs, too.
Oh, yeah, lots of it. It was a constant back and forth, negotiations, compromises, occasional outbreaks of rebellion.
Sounds complicated.
It was, but the point is, even under Habsburg rule, the Hungarians never gave up on their dream of independence.
Okay, so we've got assistance to the Ottomans, tension with the Habsburgs, all while trying to maintain their own unique identity. That's a lot to deal with.
It was a tough time, but it also forged a strong sense of national unity. It showed that even though they were divided geographically, they were still Hungarians at heart.
That shared identity, it's almost like a thread that runs through all of these centuries, right? Through all the turmoil and change, it's still there, holding them together.
Exactly. And that brings us to the 19th century, a period of incredible change all across Europe. Revolutions, the rise of nationalism.
And Hungary was right in the thick of it, I bet.
Absolutely. But that's a story for another time. For now, I think the big takeaway here is that despite all the challenges, Hungary never lost sight of who they were. They never gave up on the dream of a free and independent Hungary, and that's something worth remembering.
I agree. It's a story of resilience, of determination, of holding on to your identity even when the world around you is changing. And that's a message that resonates even today.
Our podcast discussions are based on our ebook, Hungary's Hall of Fame in a Nutshell. History, literature, art, music, science, sport. Scan the QR code or check the link in the description to download your copy of Hungary's Hall of Fame in a Nutshell. As a special bonus, you'll also receive the Illustrated Companion, featuring over 100 detailed illustrations to visually enrich your understanding of the book's content. Thank you for watching.